The movers hadn't even finished loading the truck when Travis finally understood what he had lost. I watched him from across the room. This man who had pointed his finger at me 3 days earlier and told me I was no longer welcome in my own home. And I watched the color drain out of his face like water leaving a bathtub. Slow, steady, unstoppable. He was staring at a single sheet of paper on the dining room table. I had placed it there on purpose. I wanted him to find it standing up. I wanted him to read it alone, without me in the room to soften the blow or explain away the numbers. I wanted the truth to meet him the same way it had met me, quietly, in the morning, without warning, without mercy. Yvonne was standing in the hallway behind me. I could feel her there without turning around. 66 years old, fire-red lipstick at 8 in the morning, arms crossed like a woman who had been waiting her whole life for exactly this moment. She didn't say a word. She didn't have to. Outside, one of the movers called out to his partner. A door slammed on the truck. Somewhere down the street, a dog was barking at nothing. Travis looked up from the paper. He looked at my daughter Diane. She was standing near the kitchen doorway with one hand pressed flat against the wall, like she needed something solid to hold on to. She didn't look at him. She looked at me. And in her eyes, I saw everything she hadn't said for 12 months. I picked up my purse from the side table. I tucked Harold's photo, the one I carry everywhere, the one from our 25th anniversary where he's laughing at something I said and his whole face looks like sunshine. I tucked it under my arm. Then I walked toward the front door. Travis said my name, just once. Sara. Not a shout, not a plea, just the sound of a man realizing, too late, that the floor he had been standing on belonged to someone else. I stopped at the threshold, turned around one last time, looked at the paper on the table, looked at him, looked at Diane. Then I said the only thing left to say. I hope it was worth it. I walked out into the morning air. The sun was already warm. The movers nodded at me respectfully, Mrs. Washington, and I nodded back. Yvonne came out behind me, heels clicking on the front steps, and she looped her arm through mine the way she has done since we were young women sitting next to each other in the third pew at Calvary Baptist. You okay? She asked. No, I said honestly. But I will be. She squeezed my arm. That's my girl. To understand why I was standing on those steps that morning, why my hands were steady when my heart was not, why I had placed that paper on that table, why 12 months of silence had finally broken open into something I could not look away from. You have to go back to where it started. To a Tuesday night in October, to the sound of rain on my kitchen window, and to 2 words I said without asking nearly enough questions first. Of course, I am not a wealthy woman. I want to make that clear from the beginning, because the story you're about to hear involves a number large enough that some people will assume I had money to spare. I did not. What I had was something different. Something Harold and I spent 30 years building with careful hands and patient hearts. I had savings. Harold Washington and I met when we were both 23 years old at a church potluck dinner in Southwest Atlanta. He had brought deviled eggs. I had brought a sweet potato pie. He told me later that he fell in love with me when I cut him a slice before I cut one for myself. I told him I just thought he looked hungry. We opened a small alterations and tailoring shop on Campbellton Road in 1987. Washington's Fine Tailoring. Nothing grand. A storefront barely wide enough for 2 sewing tables and a fitting corner with a 3-panel mirror Harold built himself from plywood and patience. We sewed wedding dresses and baptism gowns and Sunday suits. We took in the hems of school uniforms for mothers who couldn't afford new ones. We repaired leather jackets and winter coats, and once, memorably, a sequined jumpsuit belonging to a woman who said she needed it back by Friday for a very important reason she preferred not to explain. We were not rich, but we were consistent. Harold used to say that consistency is just another word for respect. Respect for your work, respect for your word, respect for the people counting on you to show up. When Harold died 4 years ago, a stroke, sudden, no warning, a Tuesday morning when he had been standing at the kitchen counter drinking coffee and reading the newspaper, I sold the shop, downsized from our house on Avon Avenue to a smaller place 2 miles away, and put most of the money into accounts Harold had already mapped out for me in a folder he kept in the second drawer of his desk. He had labeled it simply, for Sara, when. He knew me well enough to know I would need a plan written in someone else's handwriting. I lived quietly after that. I kept the small house tidy. I grew sunflowers in pots on the front porch, because Harold had always brought me sunflowers on birthdays, and I couldn't stand the idea of a birthday without them. I called Yvonne every Sunday morning. I read 2 books a month, sometimes 3. I went to the library on Tuesdays and Thursdays and beat teenagers at crossword puzzles without apology. I was not lonely in the way people imagine a widow must be lonely. I was quiet. There is a difference. But I will be honest with you. There is a particular kind of ache that comes at night. In the hour after dinner, when Harold used to sit in his green armchair and read while I sat in mine, and we didn't need to talk because just being in the same room was enough. That hour was the hardest. That hour still is. I tell you all of this so you understand who I was when the phone rang that October night. I was a woman who had spent her life being careful, being consistent, being the kind of person other people knew they could count on. And my daughter Diane had known that her entire life. The rain started around 7 that evening. I remember it clearly because I had been meaning to bring my sunflowers inside. The temperature was supposed to drop, and I kept telling myself one more chapter, then I'll get them. Then the phone rang. Diane's name on the screen. Nothing unusual. She called 2 or 3 times a week, but when I answered, I knew immediately that something was wrong. There was a quality to her breathing, tight, controlled, the way she used to breathe as a little girl when she was trying very hard not to cry in front of me. Mom! Diane, baby, what's wrong? She took a long breath. We're in trouble. I sat down at the kitchen table. The rain was picking up outside, tapping against the window over the sink in uneven rhythms. What kind of trouble? She told me. Travis had been with the same logistics company for 6 years, working his way up steadily to a regional coordinator position. 3 months ago, the company had restructured. His hours were cut. Not eliminated. Cut, which in some ways was worse, because they were still technically employed and therefore didn't qualify for full unemployment. The salary had dropped by almost 40%. They were behind on rent. 2 months. The landlord had sent a formal notice. How much are you behind? I asked. She told me the number. Then she told me the monthly rent. I had to ask her to repeat it. $5,800 a month, Mom. I sat very still. Outside, a branch scraped against the side of the house in the wind. Diane, I said carefully, why are you living somewhere that costs that much? The pause that followed was just slightly too long. It's a good neighborhood. Safe. The school district is better, for when we have kids. Travis said it would be temporary, just until he got promoted, and then we'd be fine. It made sense at the time. I had raised Diane for 38 years. I know the sound of her voice when she's repeating something someone else told her to believe. But I also know the sound of real fear. And underneath the careful explanation, underneath the rehearsed reasons, there was genuine terror in my daughter's voice. She was afraid of losing her home. She was afraid of what would happen if she had to look her husband in the eye and say we failed. I thought about Harold, about the way he used to say that the people you love deserve your honesty more than your comfort. I thought about Diane at 7 years old with a broken arm, not crying in the emergency room because she had decided she was going to be brave for me. How much do you need? I asked. She told me. I said, I'll help. She started crying, the real kind, the kind she'd been holding back the whole conversation. Thank you, Mom. I'm so sorry. I'm going to pay you back. I promise. We're going to figure it out. Diane, I kept my voice steady. Stop. We'll figure it out together. Okay? Okay, she whispered. I told her I loved her. I hung up. I sat at the kitchen table for another 20 minutes listening to the rain. Then I went to bring my sunflowers inside. I should have asked more questions that night. I should have asked how long they'd been struggling. I should have asked what the plan was. I should have asked whether Travis knew she was calling me. I should have asked a lot of things. Instead, I said I'll help, and I meant it with my whole heart. and I did not look closely enough at what I was agreeing to help build. For the first 2 months, I simply sent money. I transferred funds from my savings directly to Diane's account on the first of each month. We didn't talk about it much. Diane would call to say thank you and give me small updates. Travis was applying for other positions. Things were looking up. They appreciated my patience. The calls were warm but slightly too careful, the way conversations are when there's a subject everyone has silently agreed not to look at directly. Then, in month 3, Diane called with a different kind of request. The building management at Riverside Commons was processing a lease renewal. The landlord, a property attorney named Mr. Aldridge, who managed the building with the meticulous efficiency of a man who had been burned before, required that all financially responsible parties be formally listed on the lease. Travis's credit history has some issues from a few years back, Diane said. This was the first I was hearing about Travis's credit. Nothing terrible, just the business loan thing didn't work out and it left a mark. Mr. Aldridge says the lease renewal needs someone with a stronger financial profile co-signing. You're asking me to sign the lease, I said. It would just be a formality. You're already helping with the payments. It would just make it official. I asked Mr. Aldridge's number and called him directly. That part, at least, I did right. He confirmed what Diane had said. Straightforward arrangement. My name, my financial profile, added to the existing lease as co-lessee alongside Diane and Travis. I signed the paperwork, and shortly after that it was agreed, said by Diane first, practical and gentle, that it would make more sense for me to move in. Shared household, shared expenses, and besides, they missed me. Diane said she wanted me close. She said the apartment was big enough. She said it would be good for all of us. I let my sister Loretta rent my small house on a month-to-month basis while I figured out how long the arrangement would last. I packed my clothes, my books, Harold's toolbox, his green armchair, my sunflowers in their pots, and the framed anniversary photo where he's laughing and the whole world looks generous. When I arrived at Riverside Commons, Diane held on to me at the front door for a long time. Longer than a casual hello. The kind of hug that means something more than the person giving it will say out loud. Now it'll feel like home, she said. Travis shook my hand. Firm, correct, pleasant enough, but he didn't quite meet my eyes. The first month was fine. I want to be honest about that. It wasn't immediately awful. There were real moments of warmth. Sunday mornings when Diane and I cooked breakfast together and the kitchen smelled like good coffee and biscuits. Evenings when we sat on the balcony and watched the neighborhood settle into dark. Nights when Diane would knock on my door just to talk, the way she used to do as a teenager when something was on her mind. I cooked most nights. I kept the apartment clean. I managed deliveries and mail and the small administrative details of a household that accumulate invisibly when no one is paying attention to them. I watered Diane's plants when she forgot, which was often. I paid the rent. $5,800, first of every month, directly from my account. Diane and I had agreed this was simpler. One transfer, no confusion. She didn't have to worry about coordinating payments. Travis came home from work tired and was quieter than I would have expected from a man who had always struck me as someone who enjoyed the sound of his own opinions. He kept to his routines. He watched his shows in the evenings. He ate whatever was on the table without comment. He never thanked me for the cooking. That was the first small thing I noticed. Not dramatic. Easy to explain away. Some people just aren't demonstrative. Harold hadn't been much of a complimenter either in the early years of our marriage. He showed appreciation in other ways, through action, through attention. So I told myself Travis was simply that kind of man. Private. Internal. Not unkind, just self-contained. The changes came slowly, which is, I think, how the worst changes always come. First, it was small comments that could be read multiple ways. Must be nice not having anywhere to be. Some of us actually have responsibilities. Could you keep the TV down? I have an early call. I was waking at 6 every morning to have the kitchen clean before Travis came down. I was handling every errand the household needed. I was, and I say this without bitterness, just as fact, running that apartment the way I had run our shop for 30 years. Quietly. Completely, without asking for acknowledgement. And Travis was walking through all of it like a man walking through a hotel, comfortable, unaware, unconcerned. Diane noticed. I could see it in the way she watched him sometimes. A tension around her eyes, a breath held a half-second longer than normal. But she never said anything. Not to him, not to me. She smoothed things over. She changed the subject. She laughed at the right moments. She kept the peace the way people keep peace when they've decided the peace itself is more important than what's hiding underneath it. I told myself I was being patient, that this was temporary, that things would settle. Then I found the notebook. It was a Wednesday afternoon. Diane was at work. Travis was at work. I was reorganizing the kitchen, which needed it badly. The drawer by the stove had devolved into a chaos of rubber bands and expired coupons and unidentifiable keys. When I found a small spiral notebook wedged between the drawer and the back panel, I recognized Travis's handwriting immediately. He writes in blocky capital letters, each word evenly spaced. The handwriting of someone who learned precision early and never let go of it. The notebook was open to the middle. I wasn't looking for anything. I wasn't suspicious. I was cleaning a drawer. I looked down. The page was a list, organized by room. Primary bedroom, T&D. Second bedroom, mom and dad home office, nursery, convert spring, balcony, storage, consolidate. I read it twice. Then I saw the last line, written at the bottom with a small dash before it, like an afterthought. Sara, assisted living options, check availability/cost. I stood there for a long time. Not Sara's room. Not Sara. Talk to her. Not even a question mark. Just Sara, assisted living options, check availability/cost. I was 64 years old and in full possession of my health, my mind, and my driver's license. I beat teenagers at crossword puzzles. I had driven myself to this apartment in every appointment since, and I had been reduced, in Travis's neat capital letters, to a line item with a dash in front of it. I closed the drawer. I put the notebook back exactly as I had found it. I went to my room and sat down in Harold's green armchair. For a while I just sat. Then I picked up my phone and called Yvonne. I need you to come over, I said. When? Now. Yvonne knows the difference between my I want company voice and my something has happened voice. She was at the door 40 minutes later with a container of lemon pound cake and the expression of a woman ready for whatever she was about to hear. I showed her the notebook. She read it, looked up at me, read it again. Sara. I know. This man wrote assisted living, check availability. I know, Yvonne. While you were paying his rent. I looked at her. He doesn't know I'm paying the rent. The room went quiet. Diane never told him, I said. I realized it a few weeks ago. Every time money comes up, she redirects. She tells him I'm helping out. He thinks I'm here as a guest. He thinks he's carrying this household. Yvonne set the notebook down on my bedside table. Baby, she said very carefully. How much have you given them? I told her. She didn't say anything for a moment. Then she said, Does Diane know you know? No. What are you going to do? I looked at Harold's photo on the shelf, his laughing face, his Sunday morning expression. I don't know yet, I said honestly, but I'm going to think very carefully before I do anything. 3 days after I found the notebook, Travis came home from work in a mood that filled the apartment before he even took his jacket off. I had made pot roast, green beans, cornbread from scratch, Harold's mother's recipe, the one with the honey and the cast iron skillet. I had been cooking since 4 o'clock. The apartment smelled like something good, like something a home should smell like. Travis dropped his keys on the kitchen counter, didn't acknowledge the smell, didn't acknowledge me. He sat down at the table and picked up his phone. Diane and I exchanged a glance. She shook her head slightly. Let it go. Not tonight. We ate mostly in silence. Travis scrolled through something on his phone, eating without looking at his plate, which was something that had always made me think of Harold's voice saying the table is for the family, the phone is for later. But I said nothing. Then Travis put his phone face down on the table and said, without looking up, "My brother called today." Diane looked at him. "About what?" "Mom and Dad's situation. Raymond's moving back home for a while. The house is going to be crowded." He paused. "They're going to need somewhere else to stay." The air in the room changed. I kept eating. My fork moved steadily. I did not look up. "Travis," Diane started. "We have the space," he said. He picked up his fork, put it down again. "It makes sense. They could help out, especially once we start thinking about—" He stopped, glanced at Diane in a way that carried an entire conversation I hadn't been invited to. "It just makes sense. We have the room." We have the room. The room they were referring to was the room where I slept, where Harold's armchair sat by the window, where my sunflowers were arranged on the sill and his toolbox was in the corner, and 30 years of careful living was organized into the space a person carries with them wherever they go. I set my fork down gently, looked at Diane. She was looking at her plate. "Diane," I said quietly, "is there something you want to say to me?" She raised her eyes. They were bright with something. Tears held at bay, or guilt, or both. Travis answered instead. "Sara." He leaned back in his chair, the way a man leans back when he's decided the conversation is already over. "I think it's time we were honest. You've been here a while. This isn't—" He paused, seemed to search for the word. "This isn't sustainable. My parents need the space, and you—" Another pause. "You have options. We can help you look into them." Options. The word from his notebook. "Travis," Diane said. "A warning." He ignored it. "I'm just being practical," he said. And then, because I suppose he felt that practical wasn't quite landing hard enough, he said the thing that split the evening in two. "You're a burden, Sara. I'm sorry, but that's the truth. This isn't working." I looked at my daughter. She did not speak. She did not say that's not true. She did not say, "Travis, stop." She did not say, "Do you have any idea what my mother has done for us?" She sat with her hands folded in her lap, and she looked at the table, and she let the words stand. In 38 years of being Diane's mother, that silence was the loudest thing I had ever heard from her. I stood up from the table. My knees were steady. My voice, when I spoke, was steady. "Excuse me," I said. "I need some air." I walked to my room. I closed the door behind me. I sat in Harold's armchair in the dark, and I thought about what I was going to do next. Not in anger, not in grief. In the clear, cold, practical way that Harold had taught me to think about problems that needed solving. Start with what you know, then find out what you don't. I knew I was being pushed out. I knew Diane had not defended me. I knew Travis had been planning this. What I didn't know yet, what I was about to find out, was exactly how deep the plan went. I picked up my phone. I called Yvonne. "I need you here tomorrow morning," I said. "Early. Bring coffee. And bring your reading glasses. We have some paperwork to go through." The next morning came in gray and still. I was awake before 5. I don't think I had truly slept. I had drifted in and out of something that felt like sleep the way a shallow puddle feels like water. Enough to wet your feet, not enough to drink. I made coffee. Strong the way Harold always made it. 2 scoops more than the package suggests, because he said the package was written for people who were afraid of being fully awake. I sat at the kitchen table alone in the quiet apartment, and I held the mug with both hands, and I listened to the building breathe around me. Diane's bedroom door was closed. Travis had not come to check on me after dinner. No knock, no footstep in the hall, nothing. That told me something. A man who had spoken cruelly to a guest, even a guest he resented, and felt no impulse to check on her afterward, was not a man struggling with guilt. He was a man who had decided the conversation was finished. I was a line item with a dash in front of it, and the line had been drawn. I was on my second cup of coffee when I noticed the newspaper. Travis had a habit of bringing in the physical paper every morning. One of those small rituals that seem charming until you understand the person well enough to see they're really just about having something to hold while they ignore everyone around them. The paper was on the end of the kitchen counter where he always left it when he was done. I wouldn't have touched it normally. It wasn't mine. But it had fallen half open, and the page facing up was the real estate section. I don't know why I looked. Instinct, maybe. Or maybe Harold's voice in the back of my mind saying, pay attention to the things that seem accidental. I pulled the paper toward me. The real estate section was folded back to a page of apartment listings. Several listings. Someone had been reading this carefully. The page had the soft, creased look of paper that has been handled more than once. One listing was circled in red ink. A 2-bedroom apartment. Different building, same neighborhood. Monthly rent, $3,200. I stared at that number. $3,200. Not $5,800. Not even close. I turned the paper over slowly, the way you turn something over when you're not sure you want to see the other side. On the back, in the margin, in Travis's blocky capital letters. Wait until August. Sara gone. Re-sign. I read it 3 times. Wait until August. Sara gone. Re-sign. August was 6 weeks away. I set the newspaper back on the counter, exactly as I had found it. Half open, listing facing up, the margin note hidden against the counter surface. Then I walked to the kitchen window and looked out at the parking lot below. The same parking lot I looked at every morning, the same row of cars, the same young oak tree the building management had planted last spring that was just beginning to look like it intended to survive. Everything looked exactly the same as it always did. But something had shifted under me. A small shift, the kind you feel in your feet before you understand it in your mind. The kind that means the ground you're standing on is not as solid as you believed. I went back to my room, closed the door, sat down in Harold's armchair, and I called Yvonne. Yvonne, I said quietly, I need you to help me check some things. What kind of things? I looked at the window, at my sunflowers on the sill, turning their faces toward the early light the way they always did, faithful and uncomplicated. The kind of things, I said, that I should have checked 12 months ago. Yvonne arrived at 8:30 with a thermos of her own coffee. Because yours is too strong, Sara, you're going to vibrate out of your shoes. And a pan of sweet potato muffins wrapped in foil, and a look on her face that said she had been thinking hard since my call, and was ready to think harder. Diane had already left for work. Travis had left before her, earlier than usual, without coming into the kitchen at all. I had heard his footsteps in the hallway, heard the front door open and close, and felt, not relief exactly, but the particular quiet of a room that has stopped pretending. I met Yvonne at the door and we went straight to the kitchen table. I told her about the newspaper, the circled listing, the note in the margin. She listened without interrupting, which for Yvonne requires visible effort. When I finished, she picked up her coffee, took a long, slow sip, and then set it down with the deliberate care of a woman who is choosing her next words with surgical precision. Okay, she said. One question. Go ahead. Have you actually read the lease you signed? I looked at her. Sara, I read it. Every page, every clause, slowly, the way Harold would have read it. I did not answer. That is what I thought, Yvonne said, not unkindly. Go get it. I retrieved the lease from the folder I kept in the second drawer of my bedside table. Harold's system. Every important document in a labeled folder. Second drawer. Never the first, because the first drawer was for things you needed in a hurry, and important documents should never be stored where you might grab them carelessly. I brought it to the table, 14 pages, paper-clipped, with my signature on the last page alongside Diane's and Travis's. Yvonne put on her reading glasses. I put on mine. We read. Page 1 was standard. Names, dates, property address. The names listed as lessees. Travis Holloway, Diane Holloway, Sara Washington. I had known this. I had signed it. But seeing my name in that row, between Diane Holloway and the signature line, looked different in the morning light of this particular morning than it had on the day I signed it. Co-lessee, it said next to my name. Not guarantor, not secondary occupant. Co-lessee. Equal party. Yvonne tapped that word with one finger and looked at me over her glasses. I nodded. Page 3 was the financial terms. I read it slowly, the way I should have read it 12 months ago. In the event that lease responsibilities are shared among multiple co-lessees, financial obligations shall be distributed equally among all signing parties unless a separate written agreement detailing alternate arrangements has been filed with and approved by building management. I stopped, read it again. There was no separate written agreement. I had never filed one. No one had ever mentioned one. The understanding between Diane and me that I would cover the rent, that this was my contribution, that she would pay me back eventually, existed only in phone calls and quiet kitchen conversations. It had never been put in writing. It had never been filed with Mr. Aldridge's office, which meant that according to this lease, the financial obligation was shared equally among 3 parties, which meant that legally, Travis Holloway had been obligated to pay 1/3 of $5,800 every month, which meant that legally, for 12 months, Travis Holloway had paid nothing. "Yvonne," I said. "I see it," she said. We kept reading. Page 7 was the termination clause. In the event that any co-lessee withdraws from the lease agreement, the remaining lessees must requalify under current financial review standards before the lease may be continued or renewed. Building management reserves the right to conduct a full financial reassessment of remaining parties within 30 days of co-lessee withdrawal. "Requalify," Yvonne said. "Under current standards," I said. We looked at each other. Page 11 was the occupancy clause. No additional adult occupants may reside in the leased property for a period exceeding 14 consecutive days without written approval from all co-lessees and written notification to building management. All co-lessees, including me. Yvonne took off her reading glasses and set them on the table. She folded her hands. She had the expression of a woman who has seen a great deal of foolishness in her 66 years and has made peace with most of it, but is finding this particular variety somewhat harder to absorb. "So let me understand this correctly," she said. "You are on this lease as a full co-lessee. Travis cannot move his parents in without your written approval. And if you leave, the whole lease falls apart because Travis's financial profile doesn't qualify," I said. "That's why Diane needed my name on it in the first place." The kitchen was very quiet. "Sara," Yvonne said carefully, "call the landlord." I called from my bedroom with the door closed. Mr. Aldridge answered after 2 rings. He had the measured, unhurried voice of a man who spent his professional life making sure no one could later claim he had said something he hadn't. I introduced myself. He recognized my name immediately. Of course he did. It was on his lease. "Mrs. Washington, what can I do for you?" I asked him directly. What was my legal standing in the lease? "You are a co-lessee," he said. "Not a guarantor, not a secondary signer, a co-lessee. You have full legal standing equal to the other parties." "And if I were to withdraw from the lease?" A pause. Brief, but real. "The lease would require a full financial reassessment of the remaining parties before we could continue or renew. That process typically takes 30 to 45 days, and approval is not guaranteed. If the remaining parties didn't qualify," I said slowly, "what would happen? We would issue a non-renewal notice. The remaining tenants would have 60 days to vacate." I let that sit for a moment. "One more question, Mr. Aldridge. Can you tell me who originally initiated the lease arrangement? Who first contacted your office about adding a co-lessee with a strong financial profile?" Another pause. Longer this time. "I'd have to pull the file," he said. "Can you hold for a moment?" "Of course." I heard the muffled sounds of an office, papers, a drawer opening. Harold used to say that the sound of someone actually looking something up was the most honest sound in any business conversation. Aldridge came back on the line. "According to our records, the request to add a financially qualified co-lessee came from Mrs. Diane Holloway. She contacted our office directly, asked specifically about the requirements for adding a co-lessee to an existing lease, and provided your name and contact information at that time." Diane contacted you first. Yes, ma'am, before we reached out to you. I thanked him. I told him I might be in touch again soon. I asked him to note the conversation in my file. Of course, Mrs. Washington, he said. Is there anything else I can do for you today? Not yet, I said, but I'll let you know. Sentence by sentence. Short, faster. I went back to the kitchen table. Yvonne looked at my face and didn't ask. She poured me more coffee, sat back down across from me. I spread the lease out between us again. I thought about month 3. Travis on the balcony. I take care of it. I thought about every time money came up and Diane redirected. Mom is helping out. Just that. No details, no numbers. I thought about the notebook. Sara. Assisted living options. Check availability/cost. I thought about the circled listing in the newspaper. $3,200 a month. Wait until August. Sara gone. Re-sign. A smaller, cheaper apartment. Same neighborhood. A plan to move there once I was gone. But if Travis's credit disqualified him from this lease, would a different landlord at a different building be any different? Unless the plan wasn't to move somewhere cheaper. Unless the plan was to stay here. I sat up straighter. Stay here. At $5,800 a month. In an apartment Travis couldn't qualify for on his own. But what if, after I left, someone else signed? His parents, Raymond and Carolyn. His parents with their own income, their own credit history, their own clean financial profile. Moving in to help out. Moving in to share expenses. Moving in and signing their names to a lease that would keep Travis and Diane in exactly the life they had been living. Just without me. I pressed my hands flat on the table. Yvonne? She looked up. This wasn't because they needed help, I said slowly. I mean, yes, they needed help, but that wasn't... I stopped, organized the thought. I was chosen specifically, not because I was family and family helps, because I had the financial profile they needed to secure this lease. I was the solution to a specific problem, and the plan was always to use me long enough to stabilize everything, and then replace me with his parents once his credit was recovered. Yvonne was very still. And Diane knew, I said. Not a question. She orchestrated it, Yvonne said quietly. The word landed hard in the room. Orchestrated. Not she went along with it. Not she got caught up in it. Orchestrated. I don't know how much she planned, I said honestly. I don't know if she sat down and thought it all out in advance, or if she made decisions one at a time and told herself each one was justified. I don't know which version is worse. Yvonne looked at me steadily. Does it matter? I thought about it. No, I said. I suppose it doesn't. I almost didn't make the 4th call. I had the information I needed. I knew enough. I could have stopped at Mr. Aldridge, at the lease, at the newspaper in the margin, and made my decisions from there. But Harold used to say, and he was right about most things, irritatingly right, consistently right across 40 years of marriage, that almost enough information is the most dangerous amount to have. So I called my sister Loretta. Loretta is 3 years younger than me, lives in Decatur, and has the particular gift of remembering every conversation she has ever had in her life in precise and uncomfortable detail. Harold used to joke that Loretta's memory was the reason no one in the family ever lied twice. She picked up on the 3rd ring. Sara, I was just thinking about you. How are... Loretta, I need to ask you something. It's important. She shifted. I could hear it. The change in her posture when she understands that this is not a casual call. Go ahead. Did Travis call you? Before Diane called me last October asking for help? Did Travis contact you directly? Silence. A silence that was 2 seconds too long. Loretta. Sara, tell me. She exhaled slowly. He called me in September, about 3 weeks before Diane called you. He said he was worried about the family finances and that things were going to get hard, and he wanted to know if you needed anything, if something came up, whether I'd be in a position to help you out a little. The kitchen seemed to tilt slightly. He asked if you could help me. He framed it as concern. He said he just wanted to make sure you had a support system if things got stressful. He was checking, I said. My voice was very even. He was checking whether I had money, whether I had resources, whether I could afford to help them. Sara, 3 weeks before Diane called me. I didn't know what he was doing. I thought he was just, I know you didn't know, Loretta. I'm not upset with you. Quiet. He called you to check my finances, I said, and then 3 weeks later, Diane called me in tears asking for help. Yvonne had gone completely still across the table. This wasn't an accident, I said softly. They didn't get into trouble and then reach out to family. They identified a solution first, and the solution was me. I thanked Loretta, told her I'd call her back, hung up, sat in the silence. Yvonne was looking at me with something in her eyes I don't see there often. Not pity. Yvonne doesn't do pity. Something closer to grief, the particular grief of watching someone you love understand a painful thing completely. Sara, she said. I held up one hand. Just for a moment. I needed a moment. I looked at Harold's photo on the shelf across the room. His laughing face. His open, generous Sunday morning face. Harold, I thought. I think I finally understand what happened. Then I picked up my phone and called Mr. Aldridge back. That evening I sat in Harold's armchair long after the apartment went quiet. The toolbox was at my feet. I hadn't opened it. I never opened it, really. Just kept it close the way you keep certain things close, not because you'll use them, but because the weight of them is a kind of company. I ran the numbers in my head. 12 months, $5,800 a month, $69,600, nearly $70,000. From the savings Harold and I had built over 30 years of hemming pants and letting out seams and staying late and opening early and packing lunches and driving cars until they made sounds that defied mechanical explanation. $70,000, and I had been called a burden. I had been called a burden in a home I was paying for by a man who had checked my bank account before his wife dialed my number, in a room where my name was on the lease and his parents were already being measured for the furniture arrangement. I sat with that for a long time, not in anger, though the anger was there. Anger is easy. Anger is loud and it moves fast and it gives you something to do with your hands. What I sat with that night was something quieter and heavier. The particular weight of understanding that love had been used as a tool, that my willingness to show up for the people I loved had been identified, assessed, and deliberately leveraged. That is a different kind of pain than being disrespected. Being disrespected is painful, but it's between you and the person who disrespects you. This was something that had been calculated, planned, and the planning required someone to look at Sara Washington, at her savings, her reliability, her mother's heart, and see not a person, but a resource. I thought about Diane, my daughter who had slept in my bed for 2 weeks after her first real heartbreak at 17. My daughter whose wedding veil I had sewn myself, sitting up until 2 a.m. with my hands shaking because I was crying too hard to see the stitches. My daughter who used to call me on Sunday mornings just to hear my voice. How long had she known? How early had she understood what Travis was planning, or helped plan it herself, and said nothing? How many times had she looked me in the eye across the dinner table and let me believe that I was simply a mother helping her family through a hard season? How many times had she let me pay and said nothing? I thought about that nod at the dinner table when Travis said you're a burden. That small, terrible, quiet nod. She had not defended me. After everything, after 38 years, after every fever and heartbreak and wedding veil and Sunday morning phone call, when the moment came, she had not said one word. I picked up Harold's toolbox and held it on my lap. "Harold," I said softly to the dark room, "I think this is the part where I stop saving people who don't want to act right." Then I put the toolbox down, picked up my phone, and called Mr. Aldridge one final time. The call was short, 5 minutes. When it was over, I sat back in the armchair and breathed slowly, because now I knew something Travis and Diane did not. Something about the lease, about the notice I had just formally filed, About what happened to a carefully constructed plan when the foundation it was built on decided to walk away. I set my phone on the side table. I looked at Harold's photo. "Okay," I said quietly. "Okay." Then I got up, went to the closet, and pulled down the first empty box. The movers were scheduled for 8 o'clock. By 7:15 I was fully dressed, standing in the kitchen, drinking coffee that had gone cold in my hands while I watched the sun come up through the window over the sink. The same window where I had heard the rain on that October night 10 months ago when Diane called and I said of course without asking enough questions. The apartment was quiet in the way that apartments are quiet when something irreversible has already been decided and the walls know it, even if the people don't yet. I heard Travis's alarm go off upstairs, then footsteps, then water running, then the slow, unhurried sounds of a man who had slept well because he believed yesterday had gone according to plan. He came downstairs at 7:30. He walked into the kitchen, saw me standing there, and gave me the brief, businesslike nod of a man who had made his position clear and was now simply waiting for the logistics to follow. He opened the refrigerator, poured himself orange juice, stood at the counter and drank it looking at his phone. He did not say good morning. I looked at him, and I thought about Harold's voice. Start with what you know, then find out what you don't. I knew everything now, and in approximately 3 minutes, so would he. I had placed the folder on the dining room table before Travis came downstairs. 12 pages, organized in order. I had not called his attention to it. I had not said anything. I had simply set it there. On the table where we ate our meals, where he had pointed at me 2 nights ago and said, "You are a burden." And waited. He noticed it when he moved to sit down. He glanced at it the way you glance at something that isn't yours but is in your space. Then he looked at me. "What's this?" "Read it," I said. He looked at me a moment longer. Then he picked up the folder and opened it. The first page was the bank statement summary. 12 months of transfers. Each one dated, each one identical in amount, each one flowing in one direction only, out of my account to the building management company, marked clearly. Riverside Commons, monthly lease payment, $5,800, $5,800, $5,800, 12 times. Travis read the first page slowly. Then he flipped to the second, read it, flipped to the third. His face did not change immediately. That is the thing about a man whose pride has been his primary coping mechanism. The face holds longer than the understanding. He kept the expression of a man reviewing routine paperwork right up until the moment he couldn't. Then he looked up at me. "You've been paying the rent." Not a question. A statement made by a man hearing himself say something out loud that he needs to hear out loud to believe. "The full amount," I said. "Did." "Every month, since before I moved in." He put the first page down. His hand was very still on the table. "Diane told me you were helping out," he said carefully. "She said you were covering some expenses while we got back on our feet." "I was covering all of the expenses," I said. "The entire rent, every month, for a year." He sat down slowly. He stopped, opened the folder again, flipped back to the first page, looked at the total at the bottom. "That's nearly $70,000. $69,600, I said. "Yes, say I." He stared at the number for a long moment. Then he looked toward the hallway, toward the stairs, with an expression I had not seen on Travis Holloway's face before. Betrayal. Not the betrayal of a man whose scheme had been exposed. Something rawer than that. The betrayal of a man who had genuinely not known, who had built 12 months of confidence and certainty and authority on a foundation he had been kept ignorant of. "She told me you were helping," he said again, quieter. "She never said—" "She didn't tell you," I said. "I know." He was quiet for a moment. Then, "Why?" I looked at him steadily. "You'll have to ask her that." Diane appeared in the kitchen doorway then. She had been on the stairs. I could tell by the way she entered, slowly, as if she had been listening from a distance and had decided she could not stay away any longer. Her hair was down. Her eyes were already red. She looked at Travis, then at me, then at the folder in his hands. She knew what was in it. She had seen it last night when I showed her. She had sat at this same table and seen those same numbers and let out a sound I will not forget. A small, soft, broken sound. The sound of a woman who has been telling herself a story and has just watched it fall apart. Travis looked at her. $69,000, Diane. She nodded once, barely, like a person accepting a sentence they know they deserve. I reached into the folder and removed the second document, set it on the table in front of Travis. He looked down at it. It was the email, the one Mr. Aldridge had read to me over the phone, and then, at my request, forwarded to my address. Printed out, date and sender clearly visible at the top. From Travis Holloway, date, month 3 of tenancy. To Aldridge Property Management. Subject question, re-lease modification. I have a question about the process for replacing one of the co-lessees on an existing lease agreement, specifically regarding the timeline and requirements if a co-lessee were to vacate the property voluntarily. Please advise. Month 3. While I was cooking his dinners and managing his mail and paying his rent, in month 3, Travis Holloway had contacted the landlord to ask how to remove me from the lease. He read the email. Read it again. Didn't look up for a long time. Travis, Diane said softly. Don't, he said. The word was not angry. It was flat. The voice of a man who has run out of a particular kind of energy. He set the email down on top of the bank statements and pressed his palm flat against the table, collecting himself, or trying to. I was trying to find a way forward, he said finally. In month 3, I said. He did not respond. Before you had any reason to believe the situation would resolve. Before you had looked for other work in earnest. Before anything had truly changed. I kept my voice level. In month 3, while I was paying your rent, you were already researching how to get my name off your lease. He looked up at me then, and for the first time in 12 months, Travis Holloway did not have an answer. I reached into the folder one more time. This document was shorter than the others. A single page. My own notes, written in the small, precise handwriting Harold used to tease me about. Sarah, you write like you're trying to fit the whole Bible on one page. I had written down Diane's email. The original. The one she sent me last October at 2:17 in the morning. Mom, we're in trouble. We're so scared. We don't know what to do. We might lose the apartment, and I can't tell Travis how bad it is. Please, if there's any way you can help us, please. I'm so sorry to ask. I love you. I had written below it, in my own hand. Sent at 2:17 a.m. Diane does not stay up past 10 o'clock. Then I had written, cross-reference, Loretta's account. Travis called Loretta in September, 3 weeks before this email. Asked about Sarah's finances. I slid the page across to Travis. He read it. I watched the understanding move across his face, slowly, then all at once, the way light changes when a cloud passes. He had called Loretta in September. Diane had emailed me at 2 in the morning in October. The email had Diane's name on it, but the timeline told a different story. Who wrote that email? I asked quietly. Diane was crying now, not loudly, the quiet kind. Travis did not answer. Who decided what it should say? I asked. Who decided it should go at 2 in the morning, when you knew I'd see it first thing and be frightened enough to respond without thinking it through? Sarah, Diane started. I'm not angry, I said, and I meant it. I am past anger. I am asking because I want the truth to be in this room before I leave it. All of it. Even the parts that are hard to say. Silence. Then Travis said very quietly, "It was both of us." Diane closed her eyes. She was scared, he said. We both were, but the timing, the wording, that was planned. I won't pretend otherwise. I stood up from the table, walked to the kitchen counter where my phone was charging, unplugged it, turned to face them both. There's one more thing, I said, Dicey Sid. Travis looked up. Last night I called Mr. Aldridge. I filed formal notice of co-lessee withdrawal. My name comes off this lease at the end of the month. Travis went very still. When my name comes off, I continued, The lease goes into mandatory financial reassessment. The remaining lessees, you and Diane, will need to requalify under current standards. I watched Travis's face. Your credit history from the business loan 2 years ago, I said, is the reason Diane asked me to sign in the first place. It has not recovered sufficiently in 12 months. Mr. Aldridge was careful with his wording, but I understood him clearly. You can't, Travis started. I already did. If we don't requalify, you'll have 60 days to vacate. He stood up so fast his chair scraped back against the floor. Sara, you cannot do that. You cannot just... Travis. My voice was quiet, completely quiet. The way Harold's voice got quiet when something genuinely important needed to be said. You called my sister to check my finances before your wife called me crying. You wrote my name in a notebook next to the words assisted living, check options. You emailed my landlord in month 3 to find out how to remove me. You sat at this table 2 nights ago and called me a burden in a home I was paying for. And then you went to sleep. He had no words. I am not doing this to punish you, I said. I am doing this because I am a co-lessee on a legal contract, and I have the right to withdraw. I am doing this because I should have read every page of what I signed 12 months ago, and I did not. And I am correcting that now. I picked up my phone from the counter. The movers will be here in 40 minutes. Then I said the one sentence, short, clear, impossible to misunderstand, that ended the conversation. I was not your safety net. I was your plan. At 7:45, a silver SUV pulled into the parking lot. I saw it from the kitchen window. Slow, careful, the pace of people who believe they are arriving at something that already belongs to them. Raymond and Carolyn Holloway. Travis had called his father sometime in the night. I had heard the low murmur of his voice through the wall around midnight. Too quiet to make out words, but the rhythm of a man asking for something. I looked at Travis. He was standing near the counter, arms crossed, the posture of a man trying to hold himself together through structure. He saw my expression. Something in his face shifted. I called him last night, he said. I didn't tell them to come this morning. I told him things were complicated. And he came anyway, I said. Travis looked at the window. The doorbell rang before he could answer. Yvonne came from the hallway. She had arrived 20 minutes earlier, let herself in with the key I had given her 6 months ago, set up coffee, and positioned herself with the quiet authority of a woman who has appointed herself official witness to whatever is about to happen. Want me to get it? She asked. I'll get it, Travis said. He went to the door. Carolyn came in first. She was dressed carefully. Cream blouse, pressed slacks, the appearance of a woman who knew she might be photographed by history and had prepared accordingly. She carried a bakery box in one hand and a leather portfolio under her arm. Raymond followed. Quieter. He scanned the room the way men do when they walk into a situation they've been told is complicated. Reading the furniture, the body language, the air. His eyes landed on the boxes stacked by the wall. 4 of them, packed and sealed with my handwriting on the sides. Kitchen. Sara. Books. Sara. Harold's things. He looked at Travis. Travis looked at the floor. Carolyn had followed her husband's gaze to the boxes. Her smile, the prepared, pleasant smile, stayed in place but lost its warmth the way a fire loses warmth when the wind changes. Travis, she said, what is all this? Nobody answered immediately, so I answered. I stepped forward from the kitchen doorway, and I said in the same level voice I had used all morning, Mrs. Holloway, Mr. Holloway, your son asked me to leave this apartment so the 2 of you could move in. I've been paying the rent here for 12 months. The movers arrive in 15 minutes. I thought you should know before they got here. The room went very quiet. Carolyn's smile disappeared completely. Raymond turned slowly to look at his son. Travis said nothing. Raymond said his son's name, once, in the particular voice of a father who does not need to raise it. Travis. Carolyn set the bakery box on the side table. She opened the leather portfolio and looked at the first page. I could see from where I was standing that it contained a hand-drawn floor plan of the apartment. measurements, labels. She looked at it for a moment. Then she closed the portfolio quietly. Raymond was still looking at his son. "Tell me," he said, "that what this woman just said is not accurate." Travis lifted his eyes to his father, said nothing, which was its own answer. "You've been asking us to come here," Raymond said, "telling us there'd be space, telling us it would work out." His voice was low, controlled, and heavier than anger. "Did you know that someone else was paying for that space?" "Raymond," Carolyn started. "Did you know," Raymond repeated, not loudly, "that this woman, Sara Washington, has been paying nearly $6,000 a month to keep a roof over your head while you were planning to move us into her room?" Travis rubbed the back of his neck. "It's more complicated than, is it true?" A long pause. "Yes," Travis said. Raymond looked at me then, directly. The look of a man who has just learned something that has cost him a specific kind of respect for his own child and is not trying to hide the fact. "Mrs. Washington," he said, "I apologize. I don't say that on his behalf. He'll have to find his own words. I say it for myself. I would not have come here if I had known this. I would not have let Carolyn make those plans." He glanced at the portfolio under his wife's arm. "We were told there would be room. We were not told at whose expense." I looked at him for a moment. "I believe you," I said. And I did. There was no performance in Raymond Holloway. He was a man who had just discovered that his son had done something shameful and was not going to pretend otherwise. Carolyn opened the portfolio one more time, looked at the floor plan. Then she did something that I will remember for the rest of my life. She tore it in half. Slowly, deliberately, looking at her son while she did it. The two halves fell to the hallway floor. She did not bend down to pick them up. "We're not moving in," she said. Simply, finally. "We'll manage where we are." Diane had not spoken since the kitchen. She had followed the movement of the morning like a person navigating deep water, careful, slow, conserving energy for something. She stood near the staircase now, arms wrapped around herself, watching her mother-in-law's torn floor plan on the hallway floor. The movers knocked at 8 o'clock exactly. I opened the door. 2 men in navy shirts with a dolly and a large truck visible behind them on the street. The morning air came in, cool and clean and carrying the smell of cut grass from somewhere nearby. "Mrs. Washington?" "Yes. Come in, please." Travis stepped forward. Just wait a minute." "Sir," the taller mover said, politely but without yielding. "We're here at the client's request. We'll need to get started." "Sara," Travis turned to me. His voice had changed again, the last layer of control dropping away. "Please, just give us a week. 1 week. We can figure something out." I looked at him. "You had 12 months, I said. He had no answer to that. The movers came in. They were efficient and respectful, and they moved through the apartment with the quiet professionalism of people who understand that they are often working in the middle of something difficult and have learned not to make it worse. My boxes went first, then Harold's armchair, then the sunflowers in their pots, which one of the movers carried with particular care when he saw me watching. Diane came to me when the last box was being carried out. She had stopped crying, or run out of tears, which is a different thing. Her face was dry and very still, the stillness of a person who has decided to say something true even though it costs them. "Mom," I waited. "I knew," she said. "From the beginning, I knew more than I admitted. I knew Travis had looked into your finances. I knew the email, the way it was written, the time it was sent. I knew it wasn't just me reaching out to my mother. It was a plan that used your love for me as the mechanism." I looked at my daughter. I told myself you wouldn't mind. I told myself it was still real, that I really did want you here. That wasn't false. But I knew. And I let it happen. And when Travis called you a burden at that table, I didn't speak because somewhere in my mind I was still protecting the story we had built. She stopped, steadied herself. "I protected his pride over your dignity. And you are my mother. You sat up with me through every hard thing I ever went through. And when you needed me to stand up and tell the truth, I nodded and looked at my plate. The apartment was nearly empty now, just us and Yvonne and Raymond and Carolyn and Travis, standing in a space that had been stripped down to its actual dimensions. "I know this doesn't fix it," Diane said. "I know sorry isn't enough today, but I need you to know that I see it, all of it, clearly, for the first time without excuses around it." I reached out and touched her face, the way I had touched it when she was small, when she was sick and scared, and I wanted her to know she wasn't alone. "I know," I said softly. She leaned into my hand for just a moment. Eyes closed. Then I let my hand fall. The movers were loading the last piece, Harold's armchair, going up the ramp into the truck, when Travis found me standing on the front steps. He came out alone, without his phone, without the crossed arms or the leaned-back posture or any of the armor he had been wearing for 12 months. He stood beside me and looked at the truck. "My credit," he said finally. "You asked how it got ruined. The business loan. I had a plan, a distribution company, 3 years of work. I really believed in it. It collapsed in 8 months. Took everything we had saved. I was ashamed. I still am." I listened. "When the apartment came up, I pushed for it because I wanted Diane to have something good after 2 hard years. I told myself we'd grow into it, then we couldn't, and I didn't know how to admit it. So I started thinking." He stopped. "I started thinking practically, which is what I call it when I don't want to call it what it actually is." "What is it actually?" I asked. He was quiet for a moment. "Using people," he said. "It's using people and telling yourself it's practical." The armchair cleared the ramp. The mover secured it inside the truck. "I want to tell you something," Travis said. "Not as an excuse, just as the truth you asked for." I waited. "When I called you a burden, I knew on some level that something was off about the finances. I knew Diane wasn't telling me the full picture. I think I was angry at her and took it out on you, because you were the visible part of the thing I couldn't look at directly." "You were angry at Diane," I said, "and I was easier to point at." "Yes, because you thought I wouldn't push back." He was quiet for a long moment. "Yes," he said again. I nodded once, not forgiving, not closing the door, just acknowledging the truth when it finally arrived. "Be a different man than this," I said. "Not for me, for her." He looked at the ground. "I'm going to try." The mover knocked on the side of the truck. "Mrs. Washington, we're all set." Yvonne's car was parked at the curb. She was already there, leaning against the passenger door, red lipstick and crossed arms and the patient expression of a woman who has been my friend for 20 years and intends to be for 20 more. I walked down the front steps of Riverside Commons for the last time. I did not look back immediately. I watched the street first. A dog walker at the far corner, a child on a bicycle going too fast down the hill, 2 neighbors talking across a yard. The ordinary world continuing in its ordinary way, indifferent and reliable and reassuring in its indifference. "You okay?" Yvonne asked when I reached her. "No," I said, "but I will be." She opened the car door for me, which she has never done before in 20 years of friendship. It meant something. The new apartment was on the 3rd floor of a small building 6 miles away. It had large windows and a narrow balcony and a kitchen with decent cabinet space. "I checked for you, Sarah, and they are genuinely decent. Do not let anyone tell you otherwise." And a patch of garden visible from the living room window where I immediately decided the sunflowers would go. The movers brought everything up by noon. Harold's armchair went by the window. His photo went on the shelf. His toolbox went in the corner of the bedroom. The sunflowers went on the balcony railing in a row, facing the afternoon light. One by one, my life took the shape of itself again. Not squeezed into the margins of someone else's plan. Not reduced to a line item with a dash. Just my life. Full and specific and mine. That evening, after Yvonne left and the apartment went quiet, I sat in Harold's armchair with a cup of tea and looked out at the garden below. My phone buzzed at 9 o'clock. "Diane, we're leaving Riverside at the end of the month. We found something smaller and honest." Travis told his parents everything. The real version. He told me he's been carrying shame about the business for 3 years and that it made him into someone he doesn't want to be. I don't know if we fix this, but I think we're finally starting from a real place. I'm sorry, Mom. I love you more than I have been acting like. I read it twice, set the phone down, looked at Harold's photo. 20 minutes later, another message. Travis, I told Mr. Aldridge the full situation. I also called Loretta and apologized. I don't expect you to respond to this. I just needed you to know that I stopped hiding today. That's all. I sat with both messages for a long time. Then I picked up the phone and typed back to Diane. Just one line. I hear you. That's the beginning. Don't waste it. I sent it. Set the phone face down on the side table. Then I leaned back in Harold's armchair in my own apartment, with no lies in the walls and no plans being made behind my back, and no one in the next room calculating my worth against my usefulness. And I felt something I had not felt in a very long time. Not happiness exactly. Not yet. Something quieter than happiness and more durable. Peace. The real kind. The kind that doesn't require anyone else's silence to survive. I want to say one more thing before I finish. If you are a woman who has spent her life showing up for her children, her family, the people she loves, and you have started to feel the edges of yourself disappearing into everyone else's needs, pay attention to that feeling. It is not ingratitude. It is not selfishness. It is your life asking to be treated as a life. Harold used to say that the most dangerous thing a generous person can do is assume that everyone around them has the same intentions they do. He was right. He was right about most things. But I will add this. Being wrong about someone's intentions does not make you foolish. It makes you human. The foolishness, if there is any, is in staying wrong after the truth has made itself available. Read what you sign. Ask the questions that feel uncomfortable. Let the people who love you prove it in the ordinary moments, not just the dramatic ones. And if someone calls you a burden while standing on what you built, don't shrink. Don't explain. Don't wait for them to understand your value.